Ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to introduce you, Mr. Benjamin Felix. Hi, Ben. I'm honored to have you
Hey,
here. Welcome. Welcome to my show.
I'm honored to be here.
So, okay, thank you. I've wrote a short intro for the two of you who probably don't know who Ben is for my audience. So, by the way, if you don't know who Ben is, like, get out of here. I don't know what you're actually doing here. So, Benjamin Felix, Canadian, former college basketball superstar. I just discovered that. Mechanical engineer, portfolio manager at PWL Capital, where he's also head of research, MBA, CFA, CFP, CIM. I don't even know what that means, by the way. YouTuber with more than 300,000 subscribers on Common Sense Investing with Ben Felix. Podcaster, Rational Reminder podcast along with Cameron Passmore, countless involuntary appearances on my show as a virtual guest, mostly me reacting to Ben's amazing content. And more importantly, father of four. So I think I checked the records, and this is the live stream with the highest, largest number of average kids per streamer. So, so the first question is, when are you going to Mars, Ben? What else?
I mean, I have to say I was never a college basketball star.
Okay.
I just played college basketball, but it's a lot different being a star in high school than it is being a star in college. It's a whole different step
Okay.
up.
Okay. Yeah. I think going to Mars it's too complicated because maybe you are too tall for the
Yeah,
spaceship.
that would not work well. Yeah.
Okay, more seriously, I think you achieved success in many different areas at a relatively young age. Luck versus skill, or what else?
Well, lots of luck, really. I mean, just being born in Canada to good parents in a good area and all that kind of stuff is huge luck. And then all the opportunities that I've had in my life, lots of luck. But to give myself a little bit of credit, um, I mean, you know, it takes a lot of time to do stuff and a lot of effort to do stuff, like getting the formal education that I've done, which on its own doesn't make somebody successful. But combined with some lucky opportunities, they can work together very nicely. Likewise with basketball. Like, I remember when I decided that I wanted to take basketball seriously, that was a lot of time that I would spend in the gym to make that work.
I think
But
it's a competitive environment, probably basketball.
yeah, very competitive. So anyway, I mean, lots of luck. But I had to put some work in to take advantage of the opportunities that I've been lucky enough to have.
Yeah, crazy. I mean, I discovered that you're also an engineer, so yeah, that was also a surprise for me. I mean, the real question behind this is, like you, I'm doing too many things at this moment, and I wonder how you manage your time. What's your daily routine, and how are you able to like juggle with everything you have in this moment?
I don't have a system.
Okay.
uh, I to do a lot of the work that I do, I need big blocks of unstructured time. I find if I have anything in a day, and maybe that sounds extreme, but that's just how my brain works. If I have one 30-minute meeting in a day for creative work, that day is almost a write-off. Um,
Okay. So
yeah.
you
So I
probably know the concept of deep work, Cal Newport
Yeah, well,
stuff. Yeah.
exactly that. So I try and keep big blocks of unstructured time. They'll vary in their productivity. Like, I don't know for certain that I'm going to sit down and write a video, for example, or finish a piece of research that I wanted to finish. It comes in waves. Some days I'll be extremely productive. Some days I won't. I don't know how to make that more predictable,
Okay.
which is one of the reasons that I need those big blocks of time. Anyways, I don't have a very I don't have a very exciting answer.
Are you good at context switching or not that much?
For when I'm trying to do creative work, I find it very difficult to switch back and forth. Um,
Totally agree.
for other things, if I'm completing tasks, for example, I've got no problem switching back and forth between meetings and completing a task or whatever. But for creative work or for research, I find it very difficult to switch in and out.
Agree. like similar. So it's a daily struggle. Before we jump into the like financial planning and financial like passive investing and personal finance, a couple of questions in the creativity world that I'm more interested like personally. Like how much you consider yourself a content creator versus a financial planner?
I've always kind of struggled with that. I don't feel like a content creator. I know I clearly create content, but I don't feel like a YouTuber. I don't feel like I fit into the culture of YouTuber personalities. And even just on the topics that I cover and the cadence that I cover topics, like YouTubers are really good at putting out content consistently and frequently and covering current topics that matter to people. It's not something that I have been good at, but it's not something that I'm that interested in.
Okay.
When I started my YouTube channel, we were very, very consistent because we thought that was important to grow an audience. But now I write videos when I think I have something interesting to say, and I don't try and force a frequency. Um, anyway, so I don't feel like I'm a YouTuber. I feel like the the YouTube channel and our podcast and all that kind of stuff, they're kind of like they're outlets for the research that we're doing or that I'm doing for financial planning reasons for our clients. And it having content channels forces me or forces us to be able to communicate the stuff that we're doing in a way that's relevant to people. It also creates a really, really nice feedback loop. Like you don't know this, but
Yeah,
I see your stuff all the time because we have we subscribe to this service that it's like a social listening service, so we can see
okay.
whenever somebody publicly says Rational Reminder, Ben Felix,
Okay.
Common Sense Investing, whatever on the internet, it aggregates it and shows it to us. So I've been seeing your blog posts for like years.
Oh wow! I got goosebumps now. I'm sorry for my crappy English and for
No,
my
I've always thought your
Italian.
blog posts were great.
The
I've always read them.
wow.
And
Okay, I mean
anyway,
that's what else can happen in my life now. I can
yeah.
quit. I can quit. I'm done.
But stuff like that is like for content. That's one of my favorite things about it because you say, and you probably appreciate this too. You say stuff on the internet, and if you have an audience, if there are people listening, and if there are smart people listening, you get really good feedback from really smart people, and
Well,
you hear things that you hadn't previously thought about, or you find holes poked in your arguments, and that's of
everything
tremendous value.
everything I do right now it's because I started blogging 7 years ago. Like even
Right.
the actual job, like the real job I have, because still this is not a real job, but the real job I have is because somebody contacted me thanks to my public presence. So the next question is like, uh, don't you think that your impact can scale much larger if you focused more? I don't want to. I mean, sorry guys at PWR Capital, I don't want to steal Ben Felix from daily job, but you can reach like way more people. Your impact can be much bigger, even compensation wise. But wouldn't you? Don't you have this? What if I would focus much more on content creation kind of thoughts?
I mean, it's a really good question. I haven't thought a ton about it, to be honest with you. At PWL, we have a very nice business, and we have a great team of people, and it's a lot of fun being engaged in that business. Um, and it takes up a lot of my time. But yeah, I haven't thought what would it look like for me to go full time into content or try and find different ways to monetize that and things like that. I haven't put a ton of thought into it.
Okay, so I mean, those are like follow-up questions in my brain. So why did you start?
Content?
Yeah.
Well, so PWL Capital is like we're a little bit bigger now, but when I started, uh, 11 years ago or whatever it was, when I started at PWL, we were pretty small. Uh, when did I start? 10 years ago. We were pretty small. And PWL had always been a small kind of boutique financial planning firm. And because of that, I mean, it's a classic content marketing story. Because of that, we couldn't compete on advertising spend with large financial institutions. So we focused on creating content. And that was
Okay.
traditionally done through blogging. So we had some pretty successful bloggers within PWL that had helped with growth for the firm and helped build brand equity and all that kind of stuff. And then I don't remember when it was, 7 years ago or something like that, we decided that video was going to be a worthwhile thing to pursue. And that was it. So we brought in an external consultant that helped people set up channel concepts. So you had to submit your first 15 episodes, I think, and a concept for the channel. They had this like worksheet you had to fill out, and PWL funded it. And it was just like, if you want to create
Okay.
video content, we will support it. And so I was actually the last person at PWL. A bunch of people signed up to do it. It took me a year to say I would try it. And yeah, I started making. I mean, I don't know if you've seen my old videos. Have you seen my old videos?
I don't know if you've seen my old videos. Like it's crazy, but
Yeah.
it means that it's one of the few jobs that one of the jobs that like if you keep doing consistently, you will get better no matter where you start, even if you are like not able to speak in public or what else. So. Yeah, I remember your first videos. You were really like, this is what a financial advisor should be. I think your very first video is about you are a financial advisor different from the others. And now we're going to switch to that topic. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, so you kind of, it just happened because you applied, you had this opportunity. So there were other channels from PWL Capital that didn't succeed.
Yeah, there was a lot of attrition. So people made video content for a while, and some people are still making videos, but most of the channels have died since then.
Okay. So, Ben Felix, you are a financial advisor, financial planner, financial analyst. It's hard to pin on a single thing. Anyway, you are, let's switch to financial planning. So you are a strong advocate of passive investing, of course. I mean, that's why all of like the community of also financial independence that we're going to touch maybe later. And you also run a wealth management company. That's going to be a stupid question, but I got to ask, don't you fear that you would run out of customers if they followed your advice? You actually publish model portfolio, so why are you still here? I know the answer.
Yeah. I made a video on this topic because it's a question that I would get. Yeah. It's a good question though. Like why would I still have a job if investing is that easy? The joke I like to make, and I'll tell you why it's a joke, but the joke I like to make is investing has been solved. And it's a joke because we could spend the next 2 hours debating optimal investing strategies on one hand, but on the other hand, I think there is some truth to it because in general terms, we know what investors should be doing. Like we know that low costs, low turnover, like kind of included in low costs, tax efficiency, broad diversification, all of the attributes that make index investing attractive. We know that investors should be doing that. And you can get that very, very systematically. You can buy, like in Canada, for example, you can buy a single ETF that gives you a portfolio that is all of the things that I just mentioned. So in that sense, it is kind of solved. You can get a pretty good portfolio systematically. Now, PWL, we invest similarly. We invest in low-cost systematic funds that do all the same kind of stuff. But we're not focused on adding value through that because we don't think that there's value to add. We think it's something that can be done systematically. And like you said, we publish model portfolios. We think it's something that people can do.
That's amazing.
Right. Now that piece, though, I would call that portfolio implementation. That piece is relatively easy. That's the piece that has been solved. But there are a ton of decisions that lead up to and follow on from portfolio implementation that I don't think are as easy to systematize. I mean, and you would have heard we've done podcast episodes on this recently, stuff like setting objectives and quantifying those objectives. I think that's a huge task.
Can I interrupt you here? Because I mean, the new series on basics, it's so amazing, but I haven't had time to integrate in this. Maybe we will come with some questions on that. But the Who Are You? Rational Reminder episode is probably my favorite one. And probably I'm gonna
Wow.
do a video reaction maybe in 2 days, but let's see if I will have time, because I want to try to pursue the path that's explained by, I don't know how the professor is called, but yeah.
Ralph
Yeah,
Keeney.
Keeney, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, that's a whole other interesting path to explore. We I don't know if we've said this on the podcast or not yet. I think it might have been in the most recent episode. We may have mentioned it. But we did that paper on goals. We did that goals survey that we sent, that we asked people in the podcast, our podcast audience, to complete, and we did a paper on what goals people had identified and how those goals changed based on the prompts. Like, we gave 3 different questions in the survey. Anyway, we sent that off to Morningstar's, I think, behavioral research team. And they actually put some researchers on it and got back to us and came back with some really interesting analysis. We had a call with them where they talked about their findings. But one of the big takeaways there was that the process that you follow to help people identify their objectives is basically very important. They found that the types of objectives that people identify based on the progression of questions that they're asked changes. They get more abstract, I think, was the main conclusion, which is very valuable from the perspective of setting objectives, because more abstract goals are more useful, especially from the perspective of an advisor. Anyway, so there's a lot more work to do.
I can spin off like
do there.
1,000 questions about that, but yeah, there's not much. Because that's why, I mean, sometimes I love to like read about like money quotes, like that might be like too generalist, too generic, but then at one point you want something which is abstract high enough, because you're focusing too much on details. And my first like feeling is that since I'm questioning my life all the time, don't people already do that? Doesn't like everybody do this all the time? So how can people discover new goals while in the process of discovering, of writing down their goals? But maybe because many people don't just go that deep in their life. So maybe if you set some time apart to define your long-term goals, financial goals, you will discover something more. Because for me, I would think that I'm gonna do this kind of goal setting like exercise. I think already like I have a rough idea of what I want to do, like with my life.
The cool thing about moving up levels of abstraction is that people may identify a goal that's not abstract, but when you move up the levels of abstraction, you realize that what they're actually trying to achieve with that more concrete goal doesn't match up with their more abstract goal. Like we talked about this with the people from Morningstar, and they gave the example of somebody thinking that they want to buy a cottage. They want to say that's one of their major financial goals. They want to buy a cottage, and what they're imagining is that they'll be able to spend more time with their kids and their grandkids at the cottage. But when you move up the level of abstraction and realize that the goal is to spend more time with their kids and grandkids, instead of buying a cottage 2 hours away, it may make more sense for them to buy a house that's closer to their kids.
Yeah, that's really, yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
but that's the thing, where somebody comes into a financial advisor and says, I want to buy a cottage, being able to ask why and having the tools to identify the more abstract goals, I think. Anyway, so
this happens like all the time. The 5 whys technique to try to identify what's behind. You think you want X, you actually want Y, which you think X is an expression of Y, but there is a better expression of Y, which is Z. Or maybe you want to go even somewhere else. Yeah. So that's the reason why financial advisors still exist.
Well, that's one. So I mean, we got sucked into that tangent, which is I think a good conversation to have. But that's one thing. And then I think quantifying objectives is another big part of what we do as financial advisors. Given an objective, it's not always super easy to quantify how attainable it is or what has to happen for it to be attained. And that comes up empirically. Like we talked about this in one of those Advanced Basics podcast episodes recently on the exponential growth bias. People underestimate how much they need to save to achieve a goal. And there's actually a really interesting paper in the Journal of Finance that looks at exponential growth bias. And one of the things that they look at is financial advice in that paper. And they find that more biased households are more likely to seek out financial advice, which suggests that they are aware of their bias. And the interesting thing, go ahead.
Which kind of bias? The exponential growth bias?
Exponential growth bias.
Okay.
Yeah. So people seem to recognize the bias and seek out financial advice to mediate it. And in the paper, they find that more biased households who get financial advice are just as wealthy as the least biased households. But the more biased households without financial advice have lower wealth. So anyway, that's another piece of it where even if you can identify your objectives, it's not always easy to quantify and figure out how to attain those. And I think within that, stuff like retirement planning fits in there nicely, which is like a big picture quantification of the future financial independence goal. So that's still really the
there is one question
that
maybe we can clarify. What does it mean? I know sure. Because I've listened to your recent podcast, but if you can clarify a bit.
Yeah. So the exponential growth bias is the bias to view exponential functions as linear. So compounding, which I know we'll talk more about later, compounding is an exponential function. It causes wealth to grow at an exponential rate over time, but the exponential growth bias has people view it as a linear function.
So those who are not able to grasp the magic of compounding.
Yeah. Correct.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. And there are other related biases in there that cause people to undersave or to delay saving. Yeah.
Okay.
So people underappreciate how much their investments will grow.
I have another question, but actually some thought in mind that was supposed to come up maybe later, but I want to anticipate since we are on this topic. We are, I've been reading blogs and books about personal finance, investing, and blah, 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 and the magic of compounding. Don't you think that is in this current environment with low real expected returns, compounding is overrated? So what does it mean? I just put like a number. If you grow 2% per year in real terms over 55 years, is less than a 3x multiplier, while if you just do it linearly, is slightly more than 2x multiplier. So it means that when compounding, when the exponent is close to 1, the compounding is not that magic. It's amazing when it's like 50% per year. If you do it for 10 years, you become Elon Musk. But when it's like in a low environment, does it still make sense to try to praise compounding?
I mean, it's still an exponential function. It's not as exciting for sure at a 2% real return. But I think that there's a question in there about, I mean, I know you put in your notes that you think high inflation will be persistent, therefore expected real returns are low.
You have a different view?
How
That's amazing.
Well,
I'm pessimistic by default.
Yeah. The market's pricing in 10-year break-even inflation at 2.4% approximately in the U.S.
Okay.
In Canada, it's approximately similar. Now, that's the break-even rate based on the spread between nominal and real return bonds. It's got a very, very noisy relationship with future realized inflation, but financial markets are pricing in that level of inflation. So should we expect 7% inflation for the next 10 years, or is it going to be lower? Of course, I don't know the answer, but I don't think it's crazy to think that inflation will taper off. That's what the market's pricing in. We expect a long-term return on stocks of about 7.4% based on our expected returns. Nominal. But that's still, we're sitting at, what is that, 5% approximately real. So I don't think that I don't think that expected real returns are that scary. Like, I don't think a 2% real.
So maybe you should review your research about the safe withdrawal rate.
Yeah, that's a
I mean,
That's a whole other interesting
pick one.
area.
And
Yeah.
I would love to see the numbers that, but I was a bit touched. Like, oh, come on, 2.2%. It's too low. No, I want to stop working. Well, what?
Yeah, that's it's interesting, right? The 2.36% finding, I think that is too low, and I think that we corrected for that in the Rash Reminder podcast. We talked about the 2.36% in one episode, but then
Yeah.
we corresponded with the author and got the international data in there, and it ends up being closer to maybe 3% or something like that.
I'm a huge
I
fan
mean,
of early retirement now. I'm a huge fan of WITFOW, the first I know all the numbers, and I feel confident with a safe withdrawal rate of around pi, which is my reference number, 3% or something. But anyway, that's just maybe religion more than numbers, but maybe.
I think, and I tried to communicate this in the videos that I did on this, but the safe withdrawal rate concept is flawed. I know you know this.
I get it. Yeah, sure.
As soon as you introduce a little bit of variability in spending, the numbers change dramatically. So the constraints are too tight on the specific research where we get the 4% rule from. I don't think that's how people actually spend down their assets.
Nobody works this way. Nobody's life works this way. I mean, I try to be as forward-looking as possible, but then I make more kids, and I don't know what happens in 20 years. Maybe I will still be living in expensive Switzerland, or I'll move to more cheaper country. I have no idea. So it's really impossible to plan your spending for the next 30 years for like regular retirees, and like 40, 50, 60 years. It doesn't make sense. For me, the FIRE concept is like more of a spectrum, something like give you some freedom. Anyway, yeah, I would try to get back on track. One question, like one inverse question, which is who should not go to a financial advisor for their wealth management? So can you envision like an archetype of person who can manage their wealth on their own? So like the actual real question is that I'm managing my wealth on my own, and I'm multi-millionaire, at least in Canadian dollars. So am I crazy, or everybody should visit a financial advisor?
Well, I don't think everybody should. I actually want to. I have a couple more points that I want to finish on what does a financial advisor actually do, and I think it's worth touching on that before we get into who should and shouldn't seek out financial advice. One of the other big ones is asset allocation. And that's, again, something where you can use index funds to implement a financial asset allocation. But asset allocation includes that part of it, how much in stocks, how much in bonds, and geographic allocations and small cap value stocks and all that kind of stuff. But it also includes allocations to an owned home. It also includes how much housing to consume, debt as a problem, like a credit card that you have to pay off, or as a tool, like implementing leverage in a portfolio. So I think that's another piece that goes into financial advice, that that investing implementation being solved doesn't really impact. You still have to make all of those decisions. And then other stuff like insurance, like other financial products, life insurance, disability insurance, annuities for retirees, which I know we'll talk about later.
If we can touch all the topics, yes. Yeah, I know that. Of course, like people, when they think about investing, they ask you, "Hey, is this ETF good for me?" Which,
yeah, exactly.
What the hell? So
yeah. And then the other piece of that is all of the stuff that we just talked about. There's two components of that. There's the advice, and we'll talk about this later too, whether it makes sense to pay fee-only advice where you pay just for advice. The second piece is implementation. So I can give somebody advice and they go implement the advice on their own. PWL, we would consider ourselves a full service firm. We give advice and we do the implementation. So for the end client, it's completely...
You touch customers' money. People give you money and then you handle that. Okay.
Yeah. And all of the stuff surrounding it, and the coordination with other external experts and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so with all that done, to answer your next question, I don't think it would be crazy to say that everybody needs a wealth manager. I think that would be a ridiculous prescription to make.
Well, not sure. Maybe everybody will benefit to like talking to a therapist, even if they're healthy, you know. So I mean, if the price was zero, everybody would probably. There is the cost opportunity of time, but well, a couple of hours per month can be handled. So it's also a matter of quantity, I assume.
It's a matter of, well, it's two things. It's quantity, but it's also quality. I think if everybody had access to free financial advice, the bar for financial advice might be pretty low, unless it was very heavily funded by the government or something like that. And that's a problem now with financial services being fairly well regulated as an industry. It's still, there's a lot of risk in choosing a professional in financial services because a lot of people are exposed to the same problems and biases, and potentially even more so than the customers that they're serving. So if we could say that everybody had free access to high quality financial advice, then sure, that would be likely useful.
Well, maybe not personalized. Like, of course, it's hard, it's expensive to get personalized advice, but financial education, this might be more in the reach anyway.
Well, yeah. So
Like
that's
most of the
another topic that
most of the basics can be, I don't want to say solved, but can be addressed easily with something like mass produced. Like, I don't know if in schools they will teach, but that's
there's two views on that, and I know you want to talk about this in more detail too. But the two views, and we got these on our podcast from Anna Maria Lusardi, who's a big advocate of financial literacy education, and then the opposite view comes from Robert Merton, who's of course brilliant. They're both absolutely brilliant, which is interesting that they have such opposing, like directly opposing views. Lusardi would say that everybody should have more financial literacy education, and she has on her website incredible courses, full courses with speaking notes, slides, everything, and all. You just need an instructor to deliver them for free.
wow.
And she thinks that should be available to everybody.
I'll check that out. I didn't know.
Yeah, I'll send you a link. It was, I don't know. It took me a while to.
I skipped some of the rational reminder episodes. I think that one I skipped. Yeah, I remember the name because it looks Italian, like the name. But...
Yeah, she is Italian.
Okay,
she is. She's involved with some initiative for financial literacy in Italy. I can't remember what it is. Anyway, so that's her view, is that everybody should have more financial education and we need to make it available and all that kind of stuff. And Robert Merton believes, he said on Rational Reminder, like I think he even laughed about people needing to understand compound interest. He's like, people don't need to understand that. And he gave us the analogy of a car. Like, you shouldn't need to be an engineer to drive a car. And in the same way, you shouldn't need to have financial expertise to have good financial outcomes. So his perspective is that all of this needs to be solved through financial product design. So there's two polar opposite views there: financial literacy and financial product design. I don't know what the right solution is, and those are two brilliant, educated people with very different views.
Well, maybe,
so clearly
maybe they are not conflicting. Maybe okay.
Of course.
Robo-advisor is kind of born to solve the investing part. I'll say investing is solved. You get something like either you do it on your own or you pay a small fee, even though they're not that small, to have somebody invest automatically in low-cost index fund or auto self-rebalancing, whatnot. The other part, I mean, financial education is like another huge field. How you earn more money, how you save more money, how do you budget, how do you set goals. It's much more than just investing.
Yeah. Okay. So you asked a question about who shouldn't pay for financial advice. There's a lot of really interesting academic research on that question. Not on they asked the opposite question, but who gets value from financial advice. I haven't done a video on this yet, but I've been reading the literature trying to figure out what I would say. So people get utility from financial advice through a bunch of different channels, as you can imagine. Some people benefit, like the exponential growth bias we mentioned earlier. Some people benefit from reducing behavioral biases. So particularly people who would otherwise exhibit strong biases, they seem to be more likely to seek financial advice and to benefit from it. Some people get a benefit from peace of mind. There's another interesting paper in the Journal of Finance that theorizes that trust in someone, that paper is called Money Doctors. And they suggest that having a trusted advisor allows people to take more risk, which is an interesting concept. It allows people to take more
Okay.
risk in their portfolio because they trust them, and the higher expected returns end up offsetting the cost of the advisor, even if the advice sucks.
That's a double-edged sword. Like it's very dangerous. That's also why people maybe they confirmation bias and they say, okay, no, I trust this person, even when they should not. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I agree. That's a whole other issue in financial services, and that's a regulatory issue, I think. And I know we'll talk about how to identify good financial advice. Or
But
try to
we
identify
can
it.
actually hijack this right now if you feel confident. So how?
Well, we can go there. I want to finish though
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sorry to
on who shouldn't.
so many interesting.
I know. Well, we have like, I don't know. I made notes. I have like 20 pages of notes, so
Cool.
no shortage of content. It was okay. So in some other models, and this one I found to be quite interesting. There's a quantifiable benefit in a life cycle model to financial delegation, and the reasons that they give in their model is that the time taken to manage finances could otherwise be used to acquire job-specific skills in the labor market, which are ultimately more valuable than the fees paid to an advisor. Now that one's interesting, but the interesting thing about it is that the in their model, the benefits of financial advice are greatest for people with relatively low financial wealth,
Exactly.
because
I was gonna.
right,
Yeah.
and which is the opposite of how financial advice is accessed for the most part. So
Very good
that's a
point.
problem.
Very good point. Because I was going to say,
Yeah,
hey, maybe 1%. If I have 10 millions, it's a lot of money. I don't know if with that amount of time, yeah, I can.
yeah, yeah. And it's both sides of that, right? Like, as someone with lots more potential to gain through job specific skills, they'll likely be younger, earlier on, less financial wealth. Yeah,
Makes
but
sense.
therefore less attractive to a financial advisor. So there's a mismatch there between where financial advice would be most valuable and where it's most accessible.
That's not, maybe there is a correlation, but it's not like 100%. Something like wealth and wealth generation capabilities, because maybe you just inherited a huge sum of money, so you are not skilled, and you are not like, maybe in that case your time is less worth and you have a lot of money to handle. So it probably depends from both the money you have, so your wealth, and your wealth generation skills. So how much money you can generate with your time. So it's probably
Yeah,
both
yeah,
components.
that's probably true. Yeah, but there's definitely there's an inconsistency there in the overall model. I don't know how you solve it.
No.
Alternative models for fees, like fee only financial advice or flat fee financial advice, is one way to solve it, but it's relatively rare in the market, and it's exceptionally rare for implementation. Like, to get the advice piece only, not the implementation, the fee only model is becoming a little bit more prevalent, but I'm not aware. Well, there's actually some in the United States. I'm aware of some firms that charge flat
Per
dollar
hour.
fees
Yeah.
regardless of assets. Well, based on assets, but flat fees
Okay.
that don't increase as a percentage of assets. But I think it's probably relatively rare because, I mean, we know this practically, that the liability and the stress of managing $10 million, it is very different from managing $1 million. So for us to take the same revenue for those two situations, it just does not make sense as a business. I mean, it's
Okay.
scary. Like, why would someone give their $25 million to someone else to manage? Because it's scary to manage. Well, it's scary for us too. We have systems in place and we have expertise and all that kind of stuff, and we have insurance to an extent, but that doesn't make it any less scary. A mistake on $25 million gets expensive quickly.
I can imagine.
Um,
Yeah. Okay. So before we move on, RPWL Capital
I haven't answered
Services
your question.
available.
The time thing. So there's the delegation for acquiring job specific skills. I think that also relates to the happiness literature on outsourcing unpleasant tasks. There's also evidence that people like to delegate decisions that they're making on behalf of other people. And I think that we see that anecdotally with things like spouses, where a more financially inclined spouse gets uncomfortable at a certain point making financial decisions on behalf of both them and their less financially inclined spouse. We see similar things with parents and children, where a child may be like a listener of our podcast, for example, and they want their parents to get into a more evidence-based, systematic approach to investing in financial planning, but they don't want to be the ones to manage it. So I think that the delegation thing can be that too. So your question though is who should not pay for financial advice. So I guess based on all of those things, someone who doesn't want to delegate for social or financial reasons, I think that makes sense. Someone who's confident in their abilities to think in an unbiased way, because we know again that people benefit from bias correction from financial advice, and I would say that there's an interesting paper on that sort of that talks about the Dunning-Kruger effect, specifically in the domain of finance, and it's alive and well there. So I think that there's a little bit of there's an interesting interaction there.
And if I remember correctly, it's not directly related with IQ. So even smart people tend to do stupid things.
Yeah. So you've got to be smart, unbiased, not want to delegate. I guess those are the big ones.
Side question just came up to my mind. One of the critiques that I received, that I have read about it several times, about even the perfect financial advisor, is that no matter what, you always have some conflict of interest, and your interest is like to not lose customers. So sometimes I experienced this even with robo advisors. Like there are one of which is famous in Italy, that during the bear market they will try to overcompensate and do things which harm the customer, but reduces the likelihood that they will quit their advisor. So it's better to be safe than rational sometimes. Does that happen in your industry or at PWL? Well, of course not.
Well, yeah, we don't see it at PWL, I don't think. Like we have not changed our investment strategy based on market conditions as long as I've been here. Cool. And before that too, I think we've been very, very consistent for a long time. We've been pretty hard on one of the big Canadian robo-advisors because they have changed their strategy multiple times. And in our analysis, it's made their customers worse off, but it could be related to what you're talking about. Like there's a bias for action on the side of the financial advisor to make themselves look like they're doing something important. But I think it comes back to choosing an advisor. Like all of the things that I talked about where I think that there is utility in financial advice, that's not how most of the financial services industry sees this. Like if you go to, I don't know what the number is, 95% of firms that are equivalent to PWL, they're going to sell you on why their investment strategy is the best and why their access to alternative investments is going to make you better off and all that kind of stuff. So in that case, the sales pitch matches up with what you were just talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you that the most famous robo-advisor from Italy, like at the day of the bottom of the flash crash, the COVID crash, like on, what was it, like around like mid-March, they said, hey, even with the most aggressive portfolios, we are gonna buy more bonds because the market conditions are a bit, and then like was like not very robo-advisor, not that passive. But yeah, I mean, they knew that people will run out if they would lose another 10%. So yeah, makes sense. So cool. I was going to ask you if PWL Capital Services are available for Europeans or outside of Canada.
No, we're just in Canada.
Okay. Okay, cool. So I will get a question that we just poked before, which comes from the Reddit community. I also posted the fact that I'm interviewing you on Reddit and people ask interesting questions. This question comes from user Polaretto93, and the question is the following: Hi Ben, considering that as far as I know there is no public track record for financial advisors, what should we be looking for when searching for one that we can trust? So how to find a good financial advisor?
Yeah,
Because I mean,
it's a tough
this is
question.
probably also related to the fact that nowadays, like you probably experienced that, everybody's giving financial advice on TikTok, on like people trying to sell you trading courses, and there's so much wrongness around that people find it maybe possible that you can get 10% per day with this investment in crypto staking, whatnot. So how do we find somebody we can trust?
Yeah, I mean, maybe a good starting filter is not on TikTok. That's although that's not always true. There are actually someone at PWL has started posting on TikTok, and I think she's doing a pretty good job.
Okay.
But in general, yeah, not there. It's a tough question for a lot of the reasons that we've already been touching on. I think credentials, and maybe I'm biased because I have a bunch of them, but I think credentials are at least designed to be a filter. Like the CFA program is, and that's a global credential. It's not country specific. I think it's a pretty good filter because, I mean, it's really hard to complete the program. It's 3 rigorous exams, and I mean, you can't fake it.
You're talking about the CFA, no?
The CFA, yeah.
But
Yeah, the CFA
is for financial analysts. The CFP is more related to portfolio management.
Well, that's a common perception, but the
Okay.
CFA program, actually, the progression of the CFA program in level 3, which is the final level, a huge focus of that exam and of that course of study is on wealth management.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily just for individual security analysis. I think in the earlier, like in level 1, there's more of that. But as you go through the progression, I don't remember what it is specifically, but it's a very, very significant portion of the program for level 3 is based on wealth management and like individual portfolio management advice.
Yeah. This is something
and financial planning advice.
I want to second and shout out. The CFA is probably the top certification in this field. I know a few people who has a CFA, like in real life, and then many YouTubers, like all my Canadian favorite YouTubers, like Ben and the Plain Bagel. But
Richard,
yeah, CFA is probably the best international certification about financial planning and the analysis.
Yeah. And CFP, like you mentioned, is another pretty good one. It's run regionally. So like in Canada, it's FP Canada. In the US, it's the CFP board. I don't know. I can speak to Canada, for example. I know that the quality of the CFP program in Canada is actually quite good. It's run well. The program is rigorous. So in Canada, if you find somebody with a CFP, it's not the same bar as CFA, but it's still, you can expect a reasonably good baseline level of knowledge from somebody who's completed that program. It also has a work experience requirement. So again, you're not dealing with somebody who,
that sucks a bit because I actually thought about, I want to get a CFA. Why not? But then I'm not working in that field. So that kind of, I wish they were more willing to accept people.
I haven't looked at the work experience requirements in a long time. I wonder
there is
if
like 2-3 years of some. I mean, you have to be working in that field. I don't know if like having a blog makes.
That's what I was going to say, though. I wonder if financial education would qualify as relevant work experience.
Maybe. Okay, I will check. I don't know if I have 3 years of time with kids and the rest, but that's something that in a parallel universe I would be trying to get the CFA. Yeah.
Oh, it's an incredible program.
The CFP,
it's no.
As far as I know, it's not very portable. I mean, I cannot find anything which is similar in Europe because I think it's shorter. It's 1 year, something like this, and it's very country specific because you need to know regulations. I mean, you are managing people's money, while with the CFA you're probably just not directly touching people's money. Even you can, of course, but with the CFP you are actually managing portfolios, and it's really country specific. Yeah. So there are a few alternatives even in Italy or in Switzerland. I try to like dig a bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Um,
you're saying that those are like green flags.
yeah,
Red flags
exactly.
is
They're green
TikTok.
flags.
we get
Yeah, yeah,
some
yeah,
we get some
probably.
heuristic.
Yeah, yeah, those are good heuristics. Um, I think that there are also registration categories, and again, I can only speak to Canada, but so portfolio manager, that's not my job title, that's my regulatory title. I mean, I guess that they're somewhat related. It is portfolio management is part of my job, but in Canada, to be registered as a portfolio manager, you have to have completed education requirements. So you have to have either the CFA or the CIM. The CIM is like it's like a mini version of the CFA that's
Okay.
specific to Canada.
Okay, it's Canadian.
I did both because I don't know. Yeah, so you have to have one of those, and you have to have 5 years of experience managing, I think, over $5 million of assets. And in Canada, portfolio managers are held to a fiduciary standard, so you're required to act in the best interest of your clients. So I think that's another very good filter, registration category. But of course, that's also going to be very country specific. And then firms, like what PWL has done, is there's a third party independent. It's like an auditing
Auditor.
organization,
Yeah.
right? Called CFEX, the Center for Fiduciary Excellence. And so they go to firms, they audit your processes, your client communications, like they really dig into everything, and then they give you the check mark to say whether you're acting as a fiduciary or not. So we've done that, which I think is worthwhile. I would ask if I was going to seek financial advice, or if I was going to recommend to somebody else, somebody to get financial advice from, I would ask them what their investment philosophy is and how they justify it. I think that's probably a pretty good
Makes
filter,
sense.
because if they tell you that they can pick stocks or pick funds or whatever, then it's probably no good. And then probably the single most important filter, now that I'm thinking about it, I probably should have started there, is compensation model. How do you get paid? Because if someone's selling, and there's a bunch of really interesting research on this too, if someone's paid by commissions, they are, of course, far, far, far more likely to recommend whatever is going to pay them the most in commission.
Commissions. You mean they are not directly paid by customers? So you go there, they say, "I will tell you what to invest on. You don't pay me anything," which means, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Well, in Italy, this model is pretty. I mean, most of the financial advice industry is like what they were formerly like promoter of products. So they're like banks, paid by banks, like probably 95% of financial advisor, they are in the same registry of the independent financial advisor. So it's a bit of a mess too. So sorry, Italians, it's a bit of a mess. But now, with probably the latest reform, they will tell you I'm an independent financial advisor. So you can find those who are fee based and not like you pay because you pay in a way that it's not transparent. Anyway, yeah. Thank you for that. I mean, that's a good set of heuristics. No TikTok, guys. No TikTok.
Yeah.
The content people like the most is when I react to TikTok finance. Like that's amazing.
Yeah. I know. I've seen Richard the Plain Bagel.
Richard is like doing that on a regular basis. Yeah.
Yeah.
The last
I haven't
one,
done it.
this video aged like wine.
Yeah. It's funny.
The last question in the financial advisor or advising world is that, do you think the wealth management will be a sector that will still go a long way in the future, like 15, 20 years? Like even considering that many young people are approaching passive investment on their own? Or what do you think within wealth management will stay or will change in the foreseeable future?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we've touched on a lot of the reasons why I think this, but I think wealth management is difficult to automate away, because it's about managing trade-offs to make good decisions, and decisions that often affect multiple people and have a whole bunch of different inputs, like all the stuff that we just covered. And then the other big piece, and probably the biggest reason I don't think that the wealth management industry will shrink, I think it may even, well, it is growing like crazy, and I think that will only
really?
continue. Oh, wealth management is
Okay.
yeah. it's seen tremendous growth. There's a bunch of a lot of the consulting firms like McKinsey and Bain and EY. They've done interesting reports on the trajectory of the wealth management industry. So I'm not worried about that. But the biggest piece, I think, probably is that the trade-off. So if wealth management is about managing trade-offs, the trade-offs need to be considered based on things like expected returns and risk and the psychological impact of the decision or of the trade-off on all of the parties involved. And that's really hard to do without having a human intermediary who understands the parties involved in the decision and what their priorities are and what their biases are and whether those biases should be catered to or moderated, all that kind of stuff. So I think that there's a level of competence on investing, which that's the part that maybe we can automate, like maybe that's the robo-advisor model. Financial planning, harder to automate. But then the big piece that I think is really hard to automate, and why I think that there's going to be a place for a human at some level, is the human knowledge, the knowledge of how people tend to operate and think, and the ability to communicate advice to humans in a way that they'll be receptive to. I don't think that can go away with automated services. So I think that
the behavioral aspects,
management,
the behavioral aspects are not like automatable.
Yeah, the behavioral aspects, but it's like the human aspect. Like what is a good decision? Like we talked about values and setting objectives and stuff like that earlier. So it's not just behavioral biases. I think that's one that often financial advisors will say that behavioral coaching is, that's a value added service. Maybe a little bit, but moderating cognitive biases is just as important. But also knowing how to.
Do you think that like goal setting is something that is necessarily attributable to financial advising? Because that's a huge field that's not related to finance. So this might be taken by someone else.
Yeah, I think it could be taken by someone else, but there's an intersection between setting objectives and implementing them. And the reality is that the way that humans interact with the future is through finance. So I think financial advisors are in a pretty unique position to be in that position. And even if somebody comes with their objectives that they've set with some third party, expressing those objectives through financial decisions, I mean, that takes a specific type of expertise. So even if we take the objective setting out of it, the objective implementation, and making sure that the right abstract objectives are being expressed through financial decisions, I don't think that can be outsourced by someone without the relevant financial expertise.
Interesting. Yeah, makes sense. Have you read The Design in Your Life? I don't know if you know this book.
No.
It's by two professors. I don't know. It's pretty popular. It's like Stanford Design in Your Life, like Bill Barnett and Dave Evans. It's about goal setting and like trajectory change and career. So that's. I wanted to actually connect this with your rational demand episode on goal setting. It's probably there are a few overlapping things that's interesting.
I should read that book.
Yeah, I would. I know you're running a 23 in 23. I don't know if there is time for this. I think this is good. Maybe it's not like very relevant to your current situation because I think you have things figured out for the foreseeable future. But people who are at career shift, like how to prototype, how to approach design decisions and not engineering decisions, it's pretty interesting. I would recommend that. Yeah.
I'll check it out.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. I think it's time to switch to the meat, what people are asking about. Like, hey, which ETF I want to? Not exactly that. But the first question is it's the same question coming from two different sources. It's also thanks to the user Rowandish from Reddit. And the question is about what about VWCE and Chill, which is a meme in the personal finance Italia community, VWC is like a Vanguard. I don't care about the specific ETF. It's just an accumulating ETF on MSCI World or FTSE All World. It's like a all country world. It's like, can't I just buy CAPM? Why should people do anything different?
I mean, yeah, I have no problem. That's like my comment about investing being solved. There's, there are worse ways to invest. Most approaches to investing, at least measured by the weight of assets, are worse than that. So, if someone comes to me and says, "This is my portfolio, am I doing something wrong?" I'm probably going to say no. Are there ways that it could be optimized? Sure, but that's the icing. I think the cake is owning the market. So I don't have any objection to VWCE and Chill.
Makes sense. I remember one of your episodes, we were talking about the tangent portfolio, and this is just maybe you can of course optimize differently using factor investing, but that's even too complicated for the simple question that was asked. Okay, so low-cost diversified index funds have been a turning point for the common investor. Do you see any other potential game changer, or we reach Pareto superiority in personal finance? I mean, is there going to be any other concepts like direct indexing or personalized indexing, or do you think we have solved?
Yeah, so I think that the Robert Merton perspective of financial product design could be interesting if done well, but I think that's a pretty big if, because of course people will want to charge fees for that.
Exactly.
Optimization. Like direct indexing in its current iteration, it's interesting, maybe in some very specific cases, just for the tax planning aspect. Maybe it can be interesting. We've looked at that in Canada. The tax rules are not the same as the US, where that was really developed. It's not super interesting in Canada, especially after costs, because it's much more expensive. Now, if we got to the point where you could have a very specific, like a target date funds for retirement. I don't think that those are great vehicles for a lot of reasons, but if there were individualized concepts like that, like a single fund that you could buy that you just had to own this one thing, and it automatically executed
the same of like investing with a robot advisor. This can do that for you.
Yeah,
the closer alternative I can see is that like Vanguard Life Strategy, or I wonder why there are no funds like efficient funds of funds that just, I don't know, replicate a lazy portfolio. Like I've not seen them. Like
in Canada we have that. In Canada we have constant strategic asset allocation funds that have like 60% stocks, 40% bonds, globally diversified, rebalance, all that stuff. So but I think that maybe the efficiency could be, from a financial product design perspective, being able to tweak things like your specific retirement path, your specific human capital characteristics, your specific life stage. For example, Robert Merton thinks that we should have options in these types of products to give people access to leverage. Well, he thinks leverage.
I want to discuss
that. To do that.
Yeah, I want to discuss that later.
Yeah. So stuff like that could be interesting, but it's also really hard to optimize the portfolio. So if we start saying, well, you're going to pay extra fees for this optimization, and the optimization ex ante is really hard to know if it's going to be worthwhile in the end. I don't know. It's tough. I think low cost index funds, I mean, that's a revolution. I don't know if there will be future innovations that are as revolutionary for individual investors. But I mean, I can't predict the future either.
Yeah,
so maybe,
sure. Just
if I knew what that thing was going to be, I would create it.
Yeah, I see that it's hard to beat what we currently have. But let's try to address some problems of the index fund. I'm a huge fan of your videos about the Grossman-Stiglitz paradox and how there's not exactly any risk of like becoming a bubble and mispricing assets. I'm pretty sure that I mean that's an amazing piece of research. I've actually read the actual research. But the problem and concern with index investing is that we are delegating a lot of power to the 3 or 4 largest like fund issuers like Vanguard and BlackRock. And so don't you think that is that a risk of something? Like Vanguard owns probably 30% of every company in US. So they're gonna sit in their shareholder meetings and have voting decisions. Is this a problem or not?
I don't know, frankly, and we've asked people who should know on our podcast many times,
Okay.
and they don't know either. So it's a tough question. I mean, it could go either way. The answers that we've gotten have basically been that it could make governance worse, but it could also make governance better, because the stewardship from a company like Vanguard may be better, but it may also not be representative of the people. So it could go either way. My favorite answer, and it was a non-committal answer, but my favorite answer to the question came from Adriana Robertson, and it's my favorite answer not because of the content of the answer, but because of her credentials to give the answer. She has a PhD in finance and a JD in law, both from Yale. So like the best person probably to comment on this type of problem. And she said something along the lines of she has not seen any compelling evidence to suggest that there's an issue here, and she's not worried about it.
I'm a bit scared about this, that nobody did. I mean,
well,
I can see a 51% attack, like in blockchain. If Vanguard and BlackRock team together, say, now we have 51%, now every company is gonna, I don't know, produce rockets. I don't know.
Yeah,
it scares
yeah.
me.
There's a risk there. I think it's a problem that's solved through law and regulation. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I think it, and the other thing is on this one, it's not a problem with index funds. So those are separate things. The concentration in the biggest asset managers is not an index fund problem. It's a concentration in.
Well, I can see that, I don't know, regulation can come and say, hey, no company can hold more than 5% of equities, even if you are Vanguard. So they will split Vanguard in 10 different companies, but then you cannot have total expense ratios at 0.03 because they have, each one company will have lower asset under management. So the cost will raise a bit, or maybe it's not a huge deal.
They could force delegation of proxy votes to unit holders or something like that. I don't know. There's different ways that it could be solved if it becomes a problem, if it's deemed to be an issue. But again, we've asked people who would have biases, like people from fund companies. Like we asked the CEO of Dimensional, we asked the former CIO of Vanguard, we've asked academics, and across the board, it's not a concern. So people from fund companies, of course, they would say it's not a concern, but people from academia, they have less of a vested interest in the fund industry, and still they don't seem to be concerned. So I can see why it would be concerning, but I mean, it's a bit of an appeal to authority here as opposed to my own critical thinking. But the smartest people that I could possibly ask this question to don't seem to be concerned about it. So I'm not concerned about it.
We are okay for appeal to authority here. That's like simplifies our life.
Yeah.
I'm gonna fix it. Okay. Wow, that question list is too long. We'll never run through that. I have a few questions here about country-specific things, like why, in your opinion, U.S. and maybe even Canadian investors try to be very like home biased? I know that in your reasoning, in your model portfolios, that's not true, but every resource I read about, like U.S. investing and like even financial independence in U.S. based, they call international stocks the rest of the world. So do you think it has something to do with, I don't know, American exceptionalism or something else? And is it rational?
Yeah, great questions. I think home bias is a thing in more countries than just Canada and the US. The data that I could find, like in Italy, for example, investors still have a significant home bias. The average domestic allocation in Italy is much larger relative to its capitalization weight than the average home bias, like in excess of market cap weight. Then
I can explain it pretty easily. As I said, 95% of financial advisors are like
sure, right.
bank driven, and say, hey, there is this new crappy public company. So yeah, get that.
Yeah. So that could be the problem. Although actually, so there's some research that I've looked at on this that shows that, and this is U.S. research, so maybe that's a Italy specific observation, but in the U.S., investors who have access to financial advice are more likely to be internationally diversified.
Okay.
Anyway, so home bias is a thing everywhere. So it's like we have the market portfolio in capitalization weights. Yeah, that portfolio is theoretically optimal for the average global investor. The average global investor, who is that? I mean, I don't know. It's nobody. And so I
Why
think if you
not? I
look
mean,
at
there are global people. I mean, the only difference is that there are difference in taxation. There are different optimizations to be done based on probably tax aspects. But for the rest, if you exclude everything else, shouldn't people just invest all the same?
well, I don't know. So it's a tough question to answer. I think if you look at the individual country portfolios of investors as opposed to the global market portfolio, again, it's not as easy to say to what extent exactly. Like we can look at market capitalization weights and we know what those are. The average Canadian portfolio, for example, I don't have the exact weights, but we know that it has a home bias. Same thing for Italy. We know it's a home bias. Same thing for the US. We know it's a home bias. And I think that the insight from that, or a potential insight, is that when a behavior like that is as persistent as it has been over time, we can call that irrational. But if we believe in market efficiency and rational behavior in all other areas of portfolio management, stuff like that, it might be true that there's some information in the home bias that we observe. We could say it's completely irrational. I think it's probably more sensible to believe that there's some mix of real objective reasons to do it and maybe some irrationality. So what could those reasons be? I think the risk of expropriation of foreign investor assets
Good
in
point.
situations like war or a judicial system in a country that favors local investors. Another one that shows up in the literature that's empirically, I don't know how strong this one is, but theoretically, I think it makes some sense. Hedging local consumption risk using domestic rather than foreign stocks. It's another one that's been posed as a potential reason.
What does it mean? And I don't know if it matches with what I have. My intuition is, because my intuition was, I can tell you, my intuition is that it's more connected to loss aversion probably. I'd rather be poor when my country is poor as well. So if I invest locally, if things go south, maybe the government will step in and will help everybody. If I invest all my investments is abroad, and then the everything else goes to crap, and then my country grows, I'm the poor among the rich.
Correct.
Okay, good.
So hedging local consumption risk.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you already mentioned the differences in tax treatment and costs. So we have the expropriation stuff, which I think is interesting. That's Fama. Fama believes in home bias, and expropriation is his big thing. He said to us on our podcast that that's a risk that doesn't show up in the data, because when we look at index returns, we look at local index returns as if they were earned by foreign investors. But historically, that hasn't always been the case. There have been periods of expropriation or instances of expropriation where a foreign investor would have earned much lower returns than a local investor.
In US?
From the perspective of any investor in any country. Okay. If you take an Italian investor and look at what were the returns of, I don't know, what were the returns of Canadian stocks from the perspective of an Italian investor historically? If we look at the Canadian returns in Italian currency, that may not tell us the full story about what an Italian would have actually earned investing in Canadian stocks. I don't know if there were instances of expropriation between those two countries, but so that's
okay. Now I'm super curious. I want to dig more. I will try to find some more information about that.
It's a tough one to dig into
because, or else, I'm scary. I'm investing in the global market, so that will probably even a matter of chance, some country which will create problems among each other. So
yeah. So that's a perfectly rational reason, and maybe explains why there is this, because it's a big observation, right? Like the home bias is significant and exists across all countries. So again, I come back to that question of, can we just say that, oh, people are dumb and that's why they do this? Maybe that's true to some extent, but maybe there are rational reasons.
There is, of course, also like pension plans and other like tax advantage accounts that may have some regulation, but that's again.
That could be part of it too. Now, so the one paper that I found on this that's a recent paper that's quite interesting, that looks at 401k plans in the US from a bunch of different companies. They find that access to financial advice, lower fees on international investments, and more international fund choices are associated with higher international allocations. So in that case, the financial advice piece, maybe that speaks to some biases in there, but lower fees, maybe that speaks to rational choice. They also find that education, financial literacy, and this is interesting, the fraction of foreign-born population in the zip code where the person lives also have positive effects on international diversification. So again, those are probably biases that could be corrected for as opposed to rational reasons. But I think it's realistically probably some mix. So all that to say, I think some home bias can be rational, but you don't want to be 100% in your home country, of course.
Sure. Maybe stocks and bonds need to be treated differently. I'm pretty sure that the home bias in bonds is a bit more acceptable, even actually. Yeah, you have other problems like currency and whatnot. Yeah, but for stocks,
we do. Go ahead.
With stocks, my original intuition, but you gave me a couple of good points to explore. That there are some reasons for not to invest all the same, around the world. Cool. A question about asset allocation. Warren Buffett says you should be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. As a passive investor, instead, you should be dead when others are either fearful or greedy. So the dead investor is the best passive investor ever. Why not to do both? So I'm trying to, why cannot try to have a variable asset allocation that reflects some kind of greediness in the world? I personally try to maintain a KP-based asset allocation. What's wrong with that? Of course, nothing is wrong, but
I like that answer.
But why is not like something which everybody should do?
Well,
again,
everybody can't do it.
Still personal. I don't know how to phrase it. Why is
that one though? Everybody can't do it, right? Everybody can't tilt toward the riskiest countries. Everybody can't market time. That's not how. There wouldn't be an equilibrium in that case. So there has to be a buyer for every seller and all that kind of stuff. But I think as a strategy, timing equity exposure based on CAPE is pretty messy, because CAPE has been pretty messy. AQR did a paper on this a while ago. And they basically said that it's a really messy exercise, and it can not work for very, very long periods of time. Because of course you can only condition your high and low levels of CAPE based on the historical data.
There is kind of correlation of the long-term return. Even Schiller said something like that. No, I mean, of course, you cannot tell anything in the short term, but for the next 30 years, current CAPE is a measure of what to expect for the long term.
Yeah, we use that in financial planning assumptions for sure. We give a 25% weight to the implied expected return from CAPE and we do the 25% weight because that equates to the R squared. Like if we ran a regression on our expected return assumptions, the R squared of CAPE would be 0.25, which is approximately what it's been in the empirical data. So I think using it to condition your expectations of the future from a financial planning perspective can make a lot of sense. I think timing your equity exposure based on that is too imprecise, and you can end up with if you have a theoretically perfect equity exposure for your situation, deviating from that based on CAPE. I think it's too noisy of a relationship, and you're probably better off sticking with your long-term allocation. I think in the AQR paper I mentioned on this, they suggest allowing momentum to adjust your
which is
rebalancing.
the opposite, actually. No?
Yeah.
It's like actually try to jump on the running horses instead of the losing.
They basically say to delay the rebalancing if prices have been going up.
Okay.
So that's probably fine, but I wouldn't do like strategic shifts or tactical shifts from my strategic asset allocation based on CAPE. Now, I don't think it's crazy. I don't think it's a terrible idea.
I also personally don't. I mean, I don't invest like 100% or 0%.
Yeah.
I have a small.
Right.
I have a like a stocks percentage versus CAPE curve that I try to follow. I'm not even good at following that because I'm also lazy. So luckily, I don't damage myself too much.
Yeah, I don't think that's crazy at all.
Okay, thanks. This is not financial advice.
It's not financial advice.
Another question from Reddit. So the user Investitore Comune, which is common investor in English. So this user asked, since 1955, there have been 4 declines over 40% in the SP 500, 3 of which occurred from 2000 onward. Actually, the pandemic one was 39%. I think it was less than 13%. So do you think that digital transformation might have accelerated the speed at which companies grow and collapse? So that's the basic question. And therefore, leading to a greater frequency of major declines. So should we expect more not a smooth path going on, or?
I don't know. And the question asks if you should change your asset allocation based on that. Like, should you include bonds based on this hypothesis? I mean, on company formation, I think it's plausible that more companies are being formed because it's a lot easier to start a company. You don't need as much financial capital to start a software company, for example. So that's a big change. How does that affect financial markets, though? If we look empirically, we had Scott Cederberg as a guest on our podcast. That was one of my favorite episodes. He's done all this deep historical research on returns, and in one of his papers, they look at this. They did bootstrap simulations, but using historical returns, and they were doing block bootstrap to try and maintain the historical characteristics, like the light mean reversion and volatility clustering and stuff like that. But think of it as historical data. It's simulated, but whatever, close enough. The first and fifth percentile returns, they looked at these at various horizons, and they found that the probability of losing money at like 1 month, 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, and all that kind of stuff. The probability of losing money over those periods has not changed much between the full sample and the post 2000 data.
Which,
right, sorry.
What horizon?
1841 to 2019 is the full sample, and the probability of losing money and the realized payoffs at the first and fifth percentiles were pretty much the same post 2000 as they were full sample. Yeah.
Okay.
So we asked Scott this question too. Like, okay, you've got this really long-term historical data from all these countries. Do you think the world has changed, making the data irrelevant? And this is his answer. Like, no, we looked at that. We cut off the data from 2000 backwards and looked at the 2000 to 2019 sample, and all of the characteristics in terms of loss probabilities were the same, effectively.
Does it tell something about the human growth? I mean, the whatever we are trying to do on this planet. I mean, my view is that we take like 150 years or sometimes less as an example of like infinite growth. Maybe if we take like the 500 years before, it was like flat. So maybe we are in like an exceptional time. So does it mean that this last 150 years has been exceptional at the same pace?
I don't know. I don't have the data.
Yeah.
I've seen data going back to 1800, and there's still positive risk premiums for financial assets, but that's still not that far back in history. Before that, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, sure.
the level of
it's hard to
the
get
way
it.
Scott Cederberg described it is, in 1840s there were some people that got together and traded some stocks, and in 2019 some people got together and traded some stocks. Like, that part hasn't changed. So
yeah, well,
maybe it's
sometimes I
not
wonder
surprising.
if we are reaching some kind of like saturation of, I don't know, of the derivative of growth. But anyway, that's very philosophical. As I said, I'm a bit pessimistic of like keeping like this 7-10% growth for a very long time. A couple of topics around like more concrete things around investing, which is dividends. I really love the relevance of dividends and all the like the rationality in your videos about the dividends, because I started blogging in the FIRE community, and there's like probably 50% of FIRE enthusiasts are like, hey, just get dividends. I buy stocks 4% dividends. They say, hey, but this dividends that doesn't come from nothing. It comes from total return. Anyway, I use your videos to shut up every debate on this topic. It's really amazing. But then I have a philosophical question around it. So the question is this one: if tomorrow a company that distributed dividend like dies, like Coca-Cola, stocks go to zero, stocks share values go to zero, they kind of had distributed money over time. While if a company that never distributed dividend, like, I don't know, Google or other companies, they just go bankrupt. Wouldn't that be just a giant Ponzi scheme? So I guess the question is, I understand that dividends are irrelevant, but if a company never distributes profits, is that a thing? Does it exist?
Yeah,
Or
if
it's
it never
just like
distributes
passing,
properly.
like trying to the greater full theory, like, hey, I'm giving you a share of this because it's supposed to be worth more, but then when they will disappear, because sooner or later they will disappear, nobody ever earned $1 out of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Miller and Modigliani were trying to answer that in their famous paper on this. They're asking, what do investors capitalize? What do they pay for when they buy a stock? Do they pay for expected dividends, or do they pay for something else? And what they find in their paper, what they show in their paper, is that investors care about profits minus investments. That's what they capitalize when they buy a stock. So if a company has net profits minus investments, that's what investors care about. Now, the tricky thing about dividends is that you can have a dividend that is different from profits minus investments, because a company can issue stock or they can borrow money to pay a dividend. So a dividend is not necessarily going to be in line with what investors actually are capitalizing when they buy a stock. Now,
I would not allow company dividend policy to dictate my spending behaviors.
Yeah,
it's your sentence.
yeah, I like that one. So in the Coca-Cola example, if we take an otherwise identical company that had not paid a dividend over the holding period, one investor's received dividends and say that they stuck them in a bank account. To compare apples to apples, we have to take the other investor whose returns have been identical, who has sold off equivalent amounts and taken that cash and stuck it in a bank account. At the end of the day, if the companies go bankrupt, both of them, those investors are in the exact same position.
Yes, but that's looking at the individual. Even in a Ponzi scheme, an individual can try to sell something, and that individual will be better off if, in case, what happens. I mean,
Yeah. So okay.
I take a look at the integral, like amount of money, like brought
so
home.
Take the last investor in a Ponzi scheme. They're a loser. The last investor in right. The last investor, it's exactly what it is. And in the stocks, it's not a zero-sum game. The last investor in Google has a very profitable business that is generating cash flows. So if you end up being the last fool holding Google. I don't think you're going to be so upset about
Yeah,
that.
sure. The hypothesis is that then the day after Google like goes bankrupt. So yeah, but I understand that it's more complicated than that.
Well, if we take the example of bankruptcy, I think we have to compare apples to apples, where you could have been extracting profits the whole time. I think if we compare stocks to a Ponzi scheme, it's a different it's a different conversation, and that's where I think the fact that it's a productive asset makes it a very different situation.
Yeah, well, of course, dividends and share buyback, because if there is shares buyback, there's also some money being distributed back. So, and I think no companies does zero dividend and zero shares buyback. So at least everybody's returning some sort of like some money to the investor. So that's okay. Okay, the next topic is leverage. Sorry to be like pum, but I know that I'm loving this. I'm loving this. Leverage. So that's a question that many people ask, and I also have like a personal idea about it. So you mentioned it several times, even today. You mentioned something like this. There is a way. It seems to me that for young investors, leverage should be something. Should like to spread out the market exposure over time. So if you are young, you have not much money, you should be invested more than 100. You might be invested more than 100% into the market. While when you're old, you should be invested. You might be invested less. So you spread returns over time. You have more constant exposure. But I've never found a concrete way to invest with leverage. There are different options, of course. I also like rewatch your videos investing with leverage recently, and my impression is that there are two opposing forces. One is that when the interest rates are low, so borrowing money is cheap, but market is a bit inflated. So while when markets are more tight, borrowing money costs more. So what could be an approach to invest with leverage for young adults?
Like practically which medium to use, or
the philosophy behind. I don't care about because people might think about there is this 2x like ETF daily rebalance, but we all know the negativity bias. I mean, you get that. It's not the same. While borrowing to invest now, it's expensive. So how can one try to design a leverage strategy today?
Yeah, I mean, like, how do you get the cheapest or the most efficient leverage?
Kind
of. It's going to depend on your situation, I think. I mean, someone that owns a home, borrowing against a home tends to be relatively low cost. It depends on the tax situation. Like in Canada, when you borrow to invest, the interest is deductible. So that makes the after-tax cost of interest quite a bit lower, even with rates being higher now. When you use derivatives, you're still going to have an implied financing rate, which should...
Yeah, that's not discussed enough. I think, I mean, the solution I'm thinking about is to use like options, like derivatives, essentially, to invest with leverage. And it's never talked about much. Do you think it's a viable solution? There are customers that you will suggest this kind of products, or
we don't use derivatives for clients in the cases where people do want to use leverage. And now we have a pretty biased sample, right? Because of our, like we talked about earlier, our model kind of requires us to deal with people who already have wealth, and people who already have enough wealth to be our customers are not typically the type of people that should be putting leverage in their situation. So we don't use derivatives for that reason. I mean, that would be interesting if there was like a flat fee wealth management firm that helped young investors get access to leverage, but that firm would have tremendous regulatory scrutiny. At least in Canada, leverage is heavily scrutinized. So even though it's like economically, theoretically rational for young investors to be using as much leverage as possible, I think the firm doing that for people would they would have a hard time. So I don't know. I think you touched on something else interesting, which is the cost of leverage versus expected returns. That's an interesting point, because theoretically it shouldn't matter, because you expect to earn the equity risk premium above the risk-free rate. So interest rates increase, the risk-free rate increases, your expected return should also increase. There was a paper that came out, I think last year, in the Journal of Portfolio Management that looked empirically at that relationship. Does the equity risk premium always sit on top of the risk-free rate? Right? Like, is it a constant
Well,
equity risk premium? And
there
they
must
basically
be.
found
No.
no, it's not. They found that when the risk-free rate increases, the equity risk premium decreases.
Okay.
Which makes, so now borrowing gets more expensive than expected empirically. Like,
everybody jumps on bonds.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what the mechanism is, but you end up with lower equity expected returns. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe people demand shifts. I don't know.
Probably
But
institutional investors. Okay, maybe, yeah.
They looked globally. I mean, it was a very, very surprising empirical finding, surprisingly consistent across countries. I think Japan was the anomaly where the relationship didn't hold, but it's an empirical paper, not necessarily predictive of the future. It's at odds with theory, but they had their explanation was something about operational effects on companies. I don't remember what the specific explanation was. But for someone borrowing to invest, I think it's an interesting consideration that if the cost of leverage has gone up and expected equity returns have gone down, I don't know. That would make me a little bit nervous.
Okay, so actually the two forces are not like going one in opposite, but they're actually going together. So when the cost of leverage is going down, maybe the expected return are going up. So that's the time where
empirically,
time.
It's tricky, right?
So when the Fed would say, now we're going to reduce the interest rate, that's two forces which might go together. So I don't know. It's dangerous to see that we found a rule.
That's the thing. Because it's a purely empirical paper, and then they do try and explain it, but will that relationship persist? I think that part's a little bit less obvious. So we know that it has existed in the past, which is just I don't know. It's a word of caution. Like we have clients who have leverage, and when we have not advised them to change their allocations based on rates going up and all that kind of stuff, because in their cases, the after-tax cost of leverage is still quite a lot lower than expected returns. But we also haven't tried to model, like, are expected returns lower now because rates got higher? I don't even know how we would model that in a way that's reasonable and consistent.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I once read, maybe a couple of years ago, on a blog of another Italian friend which lives in London, the concept of a 90-60 portfolio. Something like you have a 60-40 leverage 1.5. And that really fascinated me a lot. Because, I mean, I've read something about that there's like a returns expected similar to just 100% stocks, but with lower volatility. So something like better Sharpe ratio. I don't know why. I mean, whatever I read about it, it seems to be no-brainer. Why is not widely adopted? Have you ever heard about that?
Yeah, I've heard about it. I think it's really, and it's like all asset allocation. It's really tough to identify ex ante the optimal portfolio. And I think it's the same with the optimal mix of levered bonds and stocks, or levered stocks and bonds, whatever the mix is. I don't know. In the rational reminder community, there's lots of people to discuss this type of optimal allocation, and I think lots of people are trying to implement it. But again, it's going to come with risk. It's going to come with costs, and something that looks optimal in the historical data is not necessarily optimal ex ante. So I think if you add on a bunch of costs and complexity and tax inefficiency and implementation risk and all that kind of stuff for a historically optimal allocation, I don't know. It's a tough one. If it's easy, like this is the Robert Merton idea, right? If there's a financial product that gives you that's maybe more interesting, and if for a reasonable cost, maybe that's more interesting.
Yeah, also the fees of 90-60, the implementation I've seen, they're not like as cheap as plain vanilla. Yeah, but it's still in the 0.70, 80. But maybe that will offset any potential gain.
That's the tricky part about it. Yeah. And you'd expect like there's a paper from, again, some of the AQR people that they looked at embedded leverage, I think is the title of the paper. They look at products that have leverage built into them. It's the Robert Merton concept, financial product design that gives you access to optimal portfolios. And they find that the prices of embedded leverage products are bid up to account for the convenience of access to leverage. So you've got higher fees, which is an explicit cost, but you may also have inflated valuations due to the embedded leverage, which is an implicit cost. So between the explicit and implicit costs, do you actually expect to earn a net premium? It's a tough one. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, guys. We cannot find the secret sauce to beat the market today. I'm sorry for those who tried.
You'd expect that's what you'd expect, right? Like if
sure.
if there's
of course. Well, what I'm actually doing with my strategy when I try to tweak it a bit is not to get some alpha, but to reduce I usually try to plan to reduce the worst case, even when you think about I don't know, safe withdrawal rates. No, it's a matter of like if you want to increase your safe withdrawal rate, even though we know it's not the best tool. I want to try to find strategies. I'm willing to sacrifice some like potential upside return to get a better protection on the downside. That's why I wonder why. I know this is like a hot topic, but the use of derivatives to hedge against risks, that's also not talked much about. It's always like there's a stigma around it, like options are like dangerous. I know they're dangerous, but you can shape your profit loss diagram in a better way. I'm using a bit of like covered calls and sometimes cash covered puts when I want to buy some asset. And do you think that will reduce the downside risks, or can also be used for some positive? You say that you don't advise derivatives. What's your general take on derivatives? If you have any, do you personally use it, or you think it can be integrated in a strategy, or what else?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I'll come back to the conversation that I had with Robert Merton, where he thinks that there are ways that these can be used in ways that are interesting for investors, in his opinion, within financial products, because the average person is not going to successfully implement an options overlay strategy. Yeah, I don't know. On covered calls, like you hear stuff like you get nice payoff profiles and you get downside protection, all that kind of stuff. I'm relying heavily on AQR papers today, but there's another paper from AQR that looks at covered calls.
Yeah, I should read this paper.
Yeah.
Then you can link me. I will put into the description. Yeah.
I want to do a video on the paper. I haven't written it yet though. But they basically call those myths. They say downside protection is a myth with covered calls.
No, don't tell me that. Don't destroy. I don't want to read that paper.
And they say you can't focus on the payoff diagrams. Anyway, I haven't dug into the paper too deeply yet because I haven't prepared my own research based on it. But I
have an intuition about that, which is that I mean the story I tell myself is that I would rather sacrifice like if the stocks, like if my index will do 2x, I would sacrifice the upper part, but I will get downside protection. But then in the end, after 30 years, you need sometimes that the market goes like 2x because it will offset other things. If that year you will cut that, maybe that's my intuition. So that's good for downside protection in short term, maybe.
Yeah. This is one of the big challenges, I think, with these types of strategies is that they focus on optimization based on mean and standard deviation, but they forget about the shape of the overall shape, the skewness, and the kurtosis, the rest of the distribution. So you end up with a situation where, like you were just saying, you get a tiny improvement to your left tail because of the premiums, and you completely cut off your right tail or a big chunk of your right tail. And so, sure, from the perspective of mean and standard deviation, that might look nice. But from the perspective of skewness and the perspective of long-term outcomes, like it kind of relates to empirically when you look at treasury bills in the long run, they lose money, whatever. I think there's a paper that like 36% of the time in real terms, you lose money in T-bills. So the risk-free asset. Yeah. And that's global. That's not just for the US. That's so the risk-free asset from a single period mean and variance perspective is actually extremely risky in the long run. And I think the same kind of thinking can apply to these types of option strategies where we can optimize something based on single period mean and variance, and it can look very, very good. But for a long-term investor, when you take the full consideration of the shape of the distribution, how that affects your expected outcome, maybe not so
Okay.
attractive.
But on this, I have another objection. One of the best articles I've read on early retirement now, which is like probably the other favorite resource after your, like, along with your resources, with your blog and podcast, your podcast and channel, is early retirement now, that I think you you mentioned a few times. There is one amazing article in his Save Withdrawal Rate series, which is you are a pension of one, you are a pension of size one or two, between like parentheses, which means that when you want to plan for your retirement, you of course need to care about the worst case. The advantage of aggregation is that a pension fund can care about expected life expectancy. I mean, of course, because there will be like more bell-shaped curve. But while you need to plan if you live up to 100 years old or something. So, okay, I understand that. If you don't do any downside protection, which is a myth, you will end up with after X years, the distribution of your potential returns can go to broke to a billionaire. What if I can sell some of that? And I'm thinking about annuities. So like, hey, alone, I want to like improve my worst case scenario. I cannot, I need, if I want to be safe 99% of the time, I will have to be too protective. But if we aggregate together, we can be more aggressive based on like still I'm not a pension fund of one. So shouldn't annuities fix this? I mean, the fact that you can give up some upside potential in terms of whatever returns or longevity risks, and you improve your worst case scenario. So I was expecting annuities to become more popular. I don't know what's the problem with annuities.
Yeah, I mean, it's the annuity puzzle. It's well documented in academia that annuities are theoretically optimal for retirees. At least a significant annuity allocation is theoretically optimal in most models. In some models, full annuitization is optimal. So why don't people do it? That's the annuity puzzle.
I assume like it's not easy to offer annuities.
Well, I mean,
How do companies hedge? But I don't know.
Well, no, they exist. There's a market for it, and there's maybe a problem with the market, but I'll mention that in a second. But I can tell you, it's hard to sell annuities. Like we, as at PWL, we give people advice, and we a while ago, because we had Wade Pfau on our podcast, we'd had Moshe Malevsky on our podcast, and these are people who are strong advocates of annuities. Moshe Malevsky has a software that allows you to derive the optimal allocation to annuities based on your objectives, because it's really interesting. There is a theoretically optimal utility maximizing allocation to annuities for any given investor. So you've got a bequest motive, a risk aversion, a few other things like that. And based on those inputs, you can have an optimal allocation to annuities, which lets you take more risk in your financial asset portfolio. Overall, you can end up with a better expected outcome, like higher expected ending wealth with a higher degree of certainty in reaching your consumption objectives. So this software exists, and we got access to it, and we started running it for clients because we're like, this is brilliant. Of course we should be doing this. And, you know, I don't feel like I don't feel like I'm selling at work almost ever, because we're giving advice and we're telling people what they should do. When we started trying to explain to people why an allocation to annuities was optimal for this situation.
Well, I wonder what's the conversion rate. I mean, what can you
for
promise? Like, no, I mean, the conversion rate for the customer, say, okay, I'm giving you 1 million. How much do I get as annuity per year? What's the conversion rate? 4%, 5, 6, 10, 3%. It depends probably on age. It depends on several parameters. But what are the figures? Like, can you roughly tell me, if I'm 60 years old and I come to USA, I have X money, how much can I get per year, guaranteed?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just looking at an online calculator for Canada, or like a
really
rate
never
for
seen
Canada.
Figures. Like, it's incredible, because it's
so
always
for $100,000 of premium, you would get, It depends on the financial institution, but say a little at 60 years old, you'd get a little over $500 a month.
500 a month is 60,000, 6% conversion rate, but it's not bad. I mean, I have 4% rule has been beaten. You got 6%. Well, it's not inflation adjustable. That's flat.
No, it's not.
Okay, so that's a huge deal. Nobody's gonna give you an inflation adjusted annuity.
Yeah, I don't think we have those at all in Canada. They exist in some places, but they're very rare. I think maybe even in the US, they don't exist at the moment. Yeah, but people don't want them. I mean, and I don't know why. But I can tell you that when we decided like that, it was in, and it wasn't in our best interest. So PWL charges fees on assets. If we tell people to put money into annuities, we lose fee revenue. So it was against our interests financially to recommend annuities. But we decided this is the right thing to do. Like this is clearly optimal.
Okay.
We need to make this. We need to explain this to clients. And I've never been so uncomfortable in my time at PWL. It felt like I was selling something, and people didn't want it. And we were just like, we had this whole analysis thing done, and we had the model, and we had the Moshe Malevsky, who in Canada is a big deal in retirement planning. He's a professor at University of Toronto, I think. I hope that's right. And so we had this whole thing down, and why it was theoretically optimal and all this kind of stuff. And I've never been shut down so hard on a suggestion. So we stopped. I mean, we still mention it sometimes, but
okay.
So we backed right off. And I don't know why, but
many people complain. Maybe people complain in Italy. I mean, people complain about the switch from defined benefits to defined contribution. That's a kind of way to restore some defined benefits, but
people don't want it though. I don't get it. But I mean, it's not just us. It's the annuity puzzle. This is a thing.
Okay, I think this is gonna be a thing in the future. I don't know. Maybe people will get back to this. I think it just needs a couple more crashes, and people will say, okay, I'm not gonna get 10% like everybody advertised on the stock market per year. I'm okay with getting annuity and blah blah. I don't know. That's just my speculation.
Well, in Canada at least, one of the potential reasons that people don't want to annuitize is because they already have, like in Canada, we have 2 government, 3 depending on your income, government pension schemes, and that can make up a large portion of someone's retirement income. So maybe they don't need it. One of the other arguments is that there's adverse selection in annuities, which means that only people who expect to live long will buy annuities, which is then reflected in the prices. So if you're a person who expects a normal life expectancy,
expects to live longer than average, like everybody's children is smarter than average, I assume. No, people.
Well, maybe, but to the extent that people are not biased and act rationally, it's possible that annuity pricing reflects adverse selection, which for someone who does not have an above normal life expectancy makes annuities relatively unattractive. So those are potentially reasons why people don't want to annuitize.
Okay, we're getting close to the 2-hour marks. I will ask you a few more questions, and then I will leave it. Sorry, we didn't probably touch all the basics that I really care about. Maybe one day we will have a second episode of this. I don't know. A few questions. One is, do you personally invest in individual stocks? Yes or no? No.
Well, okay.
Not even for fun.
Let me.
If you want to, you can.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about it. I own shares in PWL.
Okay.
I have.
That's putting a lot of eggs in the same basket.
I know. It's risky. Maybe it's not smart. The way that I justify it, I'll tell you, is the valuation at which I'm able to purchase shares in PWL is far, far, far below what they would trade for if they were publicly listed, which they're not.
Okay. So it's probably you are converting in a stock option plan, like something.
It's it's not it's structured that way, but it's similar. Yeah. So
Okay.
I don't know. I think that I've got enough of a safety margin in there that it's okay. And then I have 2 other small private company investments that I did to support friends.
Okay.
But other than that, I don't have, and those are all private company investments. I don't have any. I don't think investing in public markets is fun or or
Really?
interesting at all. Yeah,
Having studied all the things about finance, don't you want to see if you're smarter or something like this? I think it's very natural. Maybe it's wrong, but it's
I
natural.
mean, my temptation, my portfolio is tilted quite heavily towards small cap and value stocks.
Okay.
My temptation that I have not yet acted on, but having just done my my annual savings contribution, I try to do it a big lump once per year. I was tempted to invest in a much more aggressively tilted small cap value portfolio, but I decided to stick with my regular allocations. That's the extent of my temptation. Not so much on picking individual stocks, but maybe tilting more aggressively toward factors.
Okay, and apparently small cap value as the factor you care most about.
I think without using leverage, it's probably the best way to seek high expected
High
returns.
returns. Yeah.
That's something we didn't talk about actually on leverage. And Robert Merton talked about this too when we had him on our podcast. Concentrating a portfolio on the highest expected returning assets is another way to access something that behaves a lot like leverage.
Ooh, yes. So crypto. I actually loved your crypto series. I think it 15, 17 episodes you've done on the understanding crypto, and around halfway through the series, there were like 3 or 4 consecutive guests that were like crypto skeptics. And then I think I said, okay, that's done. That's crypto. It's not an asset. But then at the end, you kind of tilted toward allowing some room for crypto to be an investable asset. So how did your idea, how did your opinion on crypto change, and if you actually even recommend somebody to put a percentage in crypto?
Yeah, so we don't recommend it at all. We do have some clients may have it because they do it on their own or whatever, and so in some cases we have to account for it in some way when we're giving advice. But from our advice, we don't tell people to purchase it as part of their asset allocation.
So if people come and say, I believe in this and I want to be exposed to that, you will take into account.
Yeah, more commonly it's somebody comes in and they already have it, or they own it they have it in cold storage, and they tell us the amount, and we then factor that into their financial plan. But yeah, we're not generally advising on it. We'll never call them and say like, hey, I think you should sell, or I think you should buy more. It's not yeah.
It's just,
So we that crypto series, and it's not done yet. We never finished it. There's more episodes that I want to do.
really?
We've had some other projects that we've been working on. So I plan to come back to that hopefully later this year. But there are a few more guests that I want to have on to finish that series off. We launched that thing with open minds. Like, we had an episode with Cam Harvey, who's a very distinguished finance professor in traditional finance. And he was so excited about crypto and DeFi that we were like, geez, okay. We'd been skeptics, but we were like, all right, if Cam Harvey, because tremendous respect for this guy, if Cam Harvey's into this, we got to at least look at it. So we really had open minds. And I think my opinion on crypto got increasingly negative throughout the series, even at the end when we had a few more positive guests on, after hearing all of the perspectives from the guests that were not so positive. Hearing what the guests who were positive had to say I did not find super compelling.
Okay.
So as an asset class, I think as an asset class, it behaves like lottery stocks, which are stocks that if crypto was a stock in the traditional financial market, it's a type of stock that we would exclude from portfolios.
Well, you don't exclude. If you get a total,
no, I agree.
So you don't do
the total market.
SP 500 minus GameStop. Like this.
Yeah, well, we do though. At PWO, we use funds that do that. So they own the total market, but they tilt towards small cap and value stocks, and they exclude small cap growth stocks with weak profitability, which is what crypto kind of behaves like.
There is also the once I read about the quality factor, which is not probably a factor. It doesn't come from fama in French, but it's something like definition of quality. I think there are also some quality index that try to define what are the like hygiene factor for a company to be accepted into the index. So that's why you probably don't have Tesla or don't have like GameStops or something like this. So that's probably something.
So profitability is not, or quality is not. It's not a fama French factor. I can't say it's not a real factor because there are models that include quality from very smart people as well. But I think the fama French answer to quality would be that it's subsumed by the other factors like profitability and investment. So those are in the fama French 5-factor model. But that's those are the factors that are used to exclude certain companies. So in our portfolios, it's not. In the products that we use. And there are ETFs that people can buy. Like it's not some special PWL thing. It's from Dimensional Fund Advisors and Avantis are the two companies that make these types of products.
Frequently in your world.
Yeah. So they emphasize all smaller, lower priced, higher profitability, and lower growth in the book value of assets or investment. Those are get the largest increase relative to market cap weight in portfolios. But then they also exclude certain types of companies based on their characteristics.
Do they have ETFs which are available on global markets or?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think in Europe they have, or the UCITS. I don't think that either Dimensional or Avantis exist over there yet. I know in the Rational Reminder community, there's a huge discussion thread on how to implement factors like those ETFs without using those ETFs. So I don't, it would be great if they did start trading there, but I don't think that they are there at the moment.
Okay. Well, I have one last question for you, then I will let you free. The question is about fire. Yeah, we didn't touch the topic. It's a topic I care about, even though I'm also skeptical about it. My question is more personal. Don't you, I've seen all your videos about like early retirement, the concept of, apart from the mathematical aspects, apart from the financial aspects, also the fact that one should not stop working, because from active work is one of the fulfilling factors in the PERMA model. I've done my studies. Don't you envision like a future where you don't have to work? And don't you want it to come as early as possible?
I don't, it's not something that I think about ever. And maybe that's why I have, I don't know if I want to call it an issue, but I don't get it. And maybe that's why it's not something that, maybe I'm sick. I don't know. When I, if I do take time off of work, I'm always thinking about, I would love to go and take half an hour at my desk to read this thing, or I would love to go take some time to write this thought that I have. And so the idea that I could get to a place where I don't have to do that is not interesting. Now, from a risk management perspective, like, of course,
I would love to lose your job or what else.
Yeah. So from that perspective, of course, and that shows up in the research on life cycle savings and consumption. Like people who are worried about that, they do precautionary saving. They save more than they otherwise need to account for risk. So to the extent that FIRE is an extreme version of precautionary saving, sure, I get it, but it's extreme, right? And if I could save at that level, all else equal, and not affect other parts of my, not like, I think I save a reasonable, a significant amount every year. But for me to save more to achieve financial independence sooner, it's just not interesting to me. Of course, I would take it. If someone said you can be financially independent today with no trade-offs, of course I would take it. And that would be...
So the priority of this goal is that low that you are not willing to sacrifice almost anything else. So that's...
Yeah. And it's because of what I said. I never daydream about a time where I don't have to. I mean, I'm working right now.
I mean,
I,
the fact is that apparently you love what you do, and you would do even if there were no money attached.
I think that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something similar to what happened to me. I mean, when I didn't like my job, I was thinking more about I should like find a way to be self-sufficient as soon as possible. Nowadays, I'm like the busiest I've ever been with like 2, 3 jobs and 3 kids. But I actually see the time that I devote to my work activities very fulfilling, and so I don't see, even if I had infinite money, I wouldn't like quit. So I can see that there is also the risk that one day that will not be more like satisfying anymore or fulfilling anymore. So that's the major risk that midlife crisis. Welcome. Ben, I have one last thing that I want to show you, but
I don't know. Like, I don't know if you have a time constraint. I don't think I do. So I'm in no rush to stop.
okay. Well, I have another like 15 minutes, then my kids will come back, so it's complicated. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to go through another a few more questions. Let's do this then. I would go on I would just touch the basics. I really loved your series on financial literacy. So that's I mean that you are starting on that. The video on financial literacy. I've actually done a live a quiz on my audience and more or less like 50% passed the financial literacy test. Better than the world average, but I was expecting better.
Yeah.
So why did you choose to focus on such a delicate, important topic?
You know, I don't even remember what I was researching, but I was researching something, and Anna Maria Lusardi's research kept coming up, and it was coming up so frequently. It must have been something related to financial literacy. I just don't remember what it was. But it's coming up so frequently that I was like, I need to. She's clearly an authority in this space. I need to look into her research. And I started looking into her research, and I was just completely blown away by the quality and the depth and the quantity of her research. So I started digging into it. And then when you start learning about financial literacy and the relationship to economic outcomes, it was blown away. So we had to cover the topic once we grasped the situation.
Well, personally, yeah, I always have this dilemma in mind. Like, is it better to do something way more basics that can impact more people, moving from 0 to 1, or going deep on some topics and helping people from 10 to 1,000? Because the world, I mean, the internet is full of like basic stuff. So, but of course, with basic stuff, you can have a larger impact. Do you have this dilemma right now? I mean, do you think I can dig more into research and become a reference for the savvy people like you are right now, or trying to become like a popularizer of like basic concepts?
So I think, and you're seeing it in our podcast content right now, we have tried to scale back, going super advanced, because at a certain point, I mean, like what we talked about with investing being solved, at a certain point, it's like, how much better off are we actually making people? It's interesting to us, and it's interesting to the super nerds out there, but how much are we helping people? So we've tried to scale back that level of complexity, and we're trying to give basic topics more advanced coverage, because you're right that there's a ton of basic content that exists on the internet, but it's not good. No, I mean, that's not fair. It's not all good. There's a lot of
noise,
bad content.
A lot of noise.
So we're trying to do that. And I actually, one of the reasons I haven't been posting as much on my YouTube channel is that I've been writing what is, I think, going to be like a course that we're going to do.
I was going to ask.
It'll be free to the public. I'm excited. It's like, hold on, I have
the first course maker that's free and doesn't end with a 7 like all the the crappy.
Yeah.
I was going to ask something,
so it's like, I don't know.
Wouldn't like some like wouldn't a course be better than just a series of episodes on something? Like a course is easily to be packaged and then proposed and offered and whatnot.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of work too. That's the thing. So I've been writing the course material. I think it's like I think it's at 60 pages in a Microsoft Word document.
Okay.
It's probably got another 20 pages of content before it's done, but we've been using that content for Rational Reminder. So that's kind of like the advanced basics episodes have been kind of like summaries of the course content. But the intention is to finish that content, record it into shorter videos, and then put it into we have like a learning software platform that we're going to stick it into, and then it'll be like a video, a quiz, maybe further reading or something like that for each section. And yeah, so we're going to put it out there for the world and hope it
For
helps
the
some
world, not
people.
just for Canadians. So it will be, wow.
Why? So the way that I'm going to explain it is that it's where necessary to be country specific, it'll be Canadian, but I'm going to be deliberate about making it globally applicable. But like if I'm talking about the specific type of pension scheme or something, it'll be Canadian references. But a lot of this stuff, like account types, you can generalize. Tax-free accounts, tax-deferred accounts, taxable accounts, that generalizes to most countries. So I'm going to try and generalize as much as possible, but there will be some Canadian-specific stuff in there.
Necessarily, yes. Yeah. How can this is a question that like many friends, many followers ask me. How can a normal person, like somebody without a following, without like being an influencer or a public figure, how can contribute to this? How can an individual improve the financial literacy problem? How to approach, I don't know, the topic with family and friends or with illiterate people in general, without scaring them? How can?
Yeah, I don't know. It's really tough. I personally do not like having those conversations. Like people, of course, because of what I do for my job, want to talk to me about that stuff. And I just find it very, I find it very difficult, and I find it very risky because I mean, look, we just spent, more than 2 hours talking about this stuff, and to have a 5-minute conversation with someone and hope to have a positive impact, I don't know. It's pretty risky. Yeah,
Still
I would
the
maybe
no
even
TikTok rule. If financial advice is shorter than half an hour, it's probably it's a lot of hidden gems.
yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, maybe asking people questions, maybe engaging people in like one of the things that we've done is we brought those talking sense cards from the University of Chicago to Canada, and we sell them through our Rational Reminder podcast store. But they're like a deck of cards that have questions that prompt financial conversations. So maybe doing stuff like that with friends or family, and just saying like, hey, let's play this game for a bit, and just prompt conversations. And but I mean, that's facilitating that type of discussion is not easy, and
Because
doing it in a way that
money is a taboo topic almost everywhere. Are you transparent? I mean, are you first person willing to break the walls of like taboos? I mean, if you know me, I'm kind of transparent. My spreadsheet is public. You can track my cents. I also do that as a I don't know, as a banner holder of a virtual battle of transparency. And like if we like remove all the taboos, that we are all better off. What do you think about transparency about money and those things?
I think talking openly about it. I mean, I don't post my net worth on the internet, but I think I'm open about it with friends and family and things like that. So I think being open about it is a positive thing for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I think this is changing with younger generations. I think it's maybe it's something that generational. I don't know. Do you experience something like that?
Yeah, I mean it's possible. I think that the crypto situation has put a mark on that type of thing. I think a lot of people were giving crypto advice to friends and family, and I think that went poorly in a lot of cases just because of where the crypto market has gone. But that was a phenomenon where people got so invested in crypto from an ideological standpoint, and from the belief that it was going to be a successful investment. But people were so excited about it ideologically that they wanted to share what they thought was genuine good with the people around them. I think that all of the arguments, the ideological arguments, are not great, but it created an interesting laboratory where people genuinely wanted to help their friends and family, and they wanted to spread this sort of gospel that they had, and I think it was disastrous in a lot of cases. But yeah, other than that, I don't know. I don't have a ton of observations about how younger generations are communicating about that kind of thing.
About that, we have a question from the live audience, which is from Federico Bidone. By the way, there are 1,100 people watching this live stream. Thank you, guys. I mean,
wow.
Probably one of the... Yes. And I hope when we will upload this on YouTube, there will be like way more people. So the question is, have you started teaching the basics of personal finance to your children?
Yes. Not formally. Like I don't have
4 kids, right? No, what are their age?
Yeah.
Their ages?
2, 4, 6, and 8.
Oh, wow. It's
2,
like
4, 6, 8.
Also,
yeah.
So now it's time for another one.
No, we're done. No more. Yeah, that's it. We're done. But yeah, so like my 2 boys, who are the older ones, the 6 and 8-year-old, they're sharp, they're intelligent, and we talk about money related stuff all the time. Just through the course of every day, people make financial decisions, and we discuss them. We discuss them openly. We discuss the relationship between happiness and money. Like if they ask for toys, for example, we talk about hedonic adaptation, and they
already?
say,
really?
why not? They talk about how they really want this toy, and I'll remind them, yeah, you really wanted this toy. This one's sitting under your bed now. Do you remember how excited you were about that? How long did that excitement last?
Did you try the marshmallow test? I actually tried the marshmallow test.
I have not. I have not.
with an actual marshmallow. It's my daughter. She passed it, but then she failed on other similar tests. But, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. So I haven't done anything like that. But talking about it for sure, like they're very well aware of what money is. Not that's a tough thing to say. I don't even know if I can describe what money is. They're aware of the general concept that it's a thing that you can use to buy stuff, and that there's trade-offs. Like if we buy one thing, it means we can't buy another thing.
So there's scarcity, no? I think that's what I'm trying to teach my eldest daughter is 5 years old almost, and I try to teach her scarcity. I mean, you cannot have everything. Economy is born to manage scarce resources. We don't do economy on air. Maybe we should. We don't do economy on something which is not scarce. But whatever is scarce, we run an economy on top. And I tried, that's the top thing I'm trying to teach her. So you can't have everything. You can choose what you can have with a certain, within a budget. But it's not easy. Yep. It's not easy because, I don't know, it's hard to delay gratification at that age. And yeah. I don't know if you experience something similar.
I don't know. I'm trying to think about it, but my 2 daughters, I think we don't really have these types of conversations. But the boys, they I don't know. They seem they have savings accounts that I put money into every month, and they understand the concept of not spending it. And if they let it accumulate, it'll allow them to buy more stuff. Haven't got so much into accumulating interest because interest rates have been so ridiculously low. It wouldn't illustrate anything.
Well, my father did something with me, like a daddy bank, where he gave me 10% per year interest. Yeah. I had little money, but then letting money sit, and at one point when I reached a certain amount, I said, we are reducing the interest to 4% because 10% is not realistic. But I remember that 10% I'm gonna hold.
Yeah.
So that I actually enjoyed the power of compounding. Well, it was 80s, early 90s, when the interest rate was the municipal, the Italian treasury whatever. I don't know how to translate the bot, Italian bonds that were like returning 10%. So
yeah. That's I like that idea. I've heard that concept before. That'd be a cool thing to try.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think I'm also running out of time. It's been a pleasure. I have one question I need to ask because the community is asking. I have a short video to show to you, which is like 5 seconds. It's your own video, and it's this one. So it comes from your Rational Reminder 241. You asked Cameron this question.
What is a budget? Really? Is it a piece of paper that you wrote down how much you want to spend on stuff?
So you asked Cameron if a budget was really a piece of paper. I also found this other concept interesting. That is like when you get compensated with stocks, you get like stock. It's almost called like stock package, equity package, share package. So I wonder if a stock package is physically a package or not. Why they say package here? Do you know about that?
Why they call a compensation package a package?
Package, yes. Was it physically a package?
I don't know.
Okay, yeah, sorry for that. It's a meme in my community. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben.
I saw you wrote something about that. I didn't try and figure out what it meant, though.
It's an Italian TV show. It's a comedy TV show where the main character complains, what is a pacchetto azionario? Is it physically a package? So, yeah. Sorry, and thank you for being so not Italian. Yeah, thank you.
I saw that one too. I didn't have time to look into what these jokes mean. I assume they're funny. I don't know.
Thank you, Ben. It's been a pleasure. I'm really honored to have you been as a guest of mine, and I hope you had a nice conversation.
Yeah, it was great, and I mean, I'm honored that you're honored because, like I said before, I've been following your stuff sort of indirectly. Whenever you mention my name, I
Wow.
read your stuff for a long time now, and I think that you're doing really great work.
Thank you. That's the peak of my career. I can retire tomorrow. For real. I mean, so I will not be in progress. I will be retired. Done. Thank you so much, Ben. It's been a pleasure. Oh, wow. Thanks a lot to Ben Felix. It's been amazing.